Okay, I'll begin. Welcome, everyone. Dobro došli. That's the Slovenian for welcome, everyone. I'm so pleased that you're joining us today. Please be advised that we're recording today's seminar, and the video will be posted on our YouTube channel, which is called CanSlo. I'm Sonia Rosenworth, the Executive Director for the Canadian-Slovenian Chamber of Commerce, the organizer and host for today's event. Today, we're presenting CSCC Business Insights 2024, Episode 6, Unravelling Public Procurement. Oopsie. I must share this disclaimer and some general information. We ask that you stay muted throughout the presentations to ensure that our speakers have time to share their insights with you. Please use the chat for your questions and comments, and we'll have a question and answer session at the conclusion of the presentations. A survey will pop up at the end of the seminar. Please provide your feedback so that we can continue to provide more CSCC business insights on the topics that you're interested in. Unraveling public procurement is a topic that many companies grapple with as part of their sales strategy and plans for their success. Government entities, broader public sector organizations such as school boards, colleges, universities, social service organizations, and healthcare represent billions of dollars of opportunity for your products and services. Federal, provincial, and municipal authorities in Canada purchase over $200 billion in goods and services each year. We're pleased to provide a discussion on how to approach public procurement with Mr. Pribac's Slovenian perspective and Mr. Wallace's insights from Supply Ontario. Mr. Simon Pribac, our first speaker, is a trade commission for the Embassy of the Republic of Slovenia in Ottawa. He was formerly the Canadian-Slovenian Chamber of Commerce board director, he is the board director now, but formerly he was the executive director in my position at the Canadian-Slovenian Chamber of Commerce in 2014 to 2017. We work closely together with the embassy, and we're very pleased that he's here to join us today. And Mr. Pribac, please take the floor. And I will share your presentation, of course.
Thank you very much, Sonia, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I am also happy to say I just arrived from Slovenia less than 24 hours ago, and we are getting quickly into that event with some fresh memories from Slovenia. And as a beginning, I will tell you something about Slovenian business environment, and then we will go towards procurement. So Sonia, please, if you could share. Perfect. As I mentioned, I'll tell a few things about Slovenia as a business and investment environment. And as you know, Slovenia prides itself on being a green, creative, and smart business destination. Next slide, please. Okay, what are the advantages of Slovenia? Slovenia has an excellent geostrategic position with well-established and easy access to markets. It has high-quality infrastructure, and it's a stable, export-driven economy with a highly innovative workforce. And here you can see where the country is placed. So, yeah, please, next slide. Slovenia is a gateway to Europe. It has very easy market access to EU markets, which cover about 500 million inhabitants, and Europe's east with 200 million, and southeast markets with 20 million inhabitants. So Slovenia has excellent business ties with all these regions of Europe, and it's part of EU. Slovenia has shared history with former Yugoslavian countries, so Croatia, Serbia, Bosnia, Montenegro, and Macedonia. About 70 years of shared history together, and over 500 years of shared history with Austria in the Habsburg monarchy, which also makes it a natural partner for German-speaking markets, which is Austria, Switzerland, and Germany. Slovenia has excellent knowledge and understanding of the neighboring countries, from customs, culture, and language. Every person in Slovenia can speak at least, besides Slovenian, at least two languages from the neighboring countries, plus English. Next. Slovenia has a high quality infrastructure. Here, we need to mention the port of Koper, which is one of the northernmost ports of the Mediterranean. It's the shortest way to Central and Eastern Europe from Asia. It has excellent port infrastructure. It's one of the most modern ports in the Mediterranean, and a leading container terminal in the Northern Adriatic, and the largest car terminal in the Mediterranean. So all the countries in Central Eastern Europe, such as Austria, Hungary, the southern part of Germany, Czech Republic, Slovakia, southern part of Poland, it all goes through the port of Koper. Slovenia has excellent infrastructure for transport, over 700 kilometers of motorways, of highways, and over almost 40,000 kilometers of the road network, and also over 1,300 kilometers of railway tracks, which doesn't sound like much, but we have to know that Slovenia is a very small country, approximately the size of Lake Ontario. Slovenia also has a very reliable and robust ICT infrastructure. Once you go there, you'll be amazed how fast and reliable internet is, for example, how the IT structure is up there. Okay. Here we have a few figures of the macroeconomic environment. You can see the GDP growth throughout the last few years. It slowed down in 2023, but it's getting back up. Also, you can see the GDP per capita is constantly growing. And, well, the export growth depends on the year. It has very low unemployment and extremely high productivity and low inflation. It was a bit higher, on the higher side, during COVID years and right after, but now it has stabilized. Slovenia is a member of European Union, the Eurozone, the OECD, and NATO, which makes it a very stable country and in tune with all the rules and regulations in like-minded countries such as Canada. Slovenia is a very export-driven economy. Here you see where most of Slovenia's export is going. Now, about 93% of GDP in Slovenia is export, which is understandable because country is very small. There is not much of market in Slovenia due to the size. So it's an extremely export-oriented economy. And top products are road vehicles, medicines and pharmaceuticals, machinery and equipment, iron, steel, metals, electrical machinery, appliances and electrical parts, chemicals, rubber and plastic products, food and beverages. The biggest export to Canada, the biggest Slovenian export to Canada are pharmaceutical products and medicines, followed by automotive components. Okay, next slide, please. Slovenia is a very stable economy for investment. So it has 100% macroeconomic stability. And it's one of the fastest growing economies in the Central Eastern Europe region. Slovenia is a committed member of the EU single market and the Eurozone, and the FDI stock has doubled in the last 10 years time. And here you can see the investment by countries in Slovenia. Okay. Slovenia is by far the cleanest country in the region. Here you can see the pollution index in 2024. Slovenia is putting a lot of effort, and it's very proud of its environment. It's at the forefront of countries transitioning to circular economy with focus on sustainability, green technologies, corporate social responsibility. It's 11th amongst EU countries in ecological innovations, the 4th most forested, and 7th richest countries in internal renewable water resources in Europe. Slovenia is the initiator of the World Bee Day, and it's the 13th country in the world in the quality of life. Next slide. Again, Slovenia is, as we mentioned before, by far the cleanest country in the region. At the same time, it's also the most productive country in the region. So this is all due to highly capable and productive workforce in the country. Slovenia has well-educated, multilingual workforce with a flair for technology and innovation. About 48% of people between 25 and 34 years of age has attained at least tertiary education, and over half of the total working population has completed secondary education, while 32 has a university degree. So 28% of university students graduated in science and engineering in 2023, and most of the working population, 98%, speaks at least one foreign language, while 83% speak at least 2 foreign languages. Okay. Slovenia is a very innovative environment and very important research and development player in the region. Again, here you see it's not the most innovative country in the world, because we have few countries before, but still it's on the top side. Slovenia has a very innovative economy, and it ranks high in infrastructure, human capital and research, business sophistication and knowledge, and technology outputs. Slovenia allocates about over 2% of its GDP to research and development, and about 70% by business sector. Slovenia spends on research and development in percentage of its GDP more than any other country in the region, and it's 9th in the whole EU. It's 16th country in total R&D personnel per capita. Okay, next slide, please. The key industries and advanced solutions in Slovenia, as we mentioned before, what are the main export industries? And here are the key advanced solutions in Slovenia. So automotive, again, ICT, machining and metalworking, electrical and electronics, healthcare product and devices, plastics and rubber, and also advanced solutions such as smart factories and industrial automation. Slovenia, we don't have this graph here, but from the list that I checked last time, Slovenia was number 5 in the world in terms of robotization of industry. So just behind South Korea, Japan, Germany, and there was one other country, but it ranks among top 10. Other solutions are in green technologies, agricultural machinery and equipment, and food processing machinery and equipment. And if you work with Slovenia, if you do business with Slovenia, you will benefit from high quality, modern production, competitive products and services at competitive prices, engineering expertise, niche specialization and long sector experience, and innovative solutions and flexibility. Next slide, please. So Slovenia is a stimulating business and investment environment. It's very open for foreign direct investment. It's the third least restrictive country among the OECD members for that. It's very easy to start a business in Slovenia. The process is fast and simple, which also plays a big part with applying for public procurement opportunities, which we'll explain later. And has very efficient clearance procedures, which allows the goods to be moved quickly and reliably. I will not bore you with the data below, so I would go to the next slide. And I would like to say a few things about the EU procurement. So, CETA agreement between Canada and European Union opens public procurement opportunities between Canada and EU. And all of these rules are explained in section 19 of the CETA agreement, plus the annexes. So what does it do? It expands and guarantees opportunities for EU and Canada to supply goods, services, and construction to all levels of government and to a wide variety of entities in public sector. CETA coverage of government contracts, listing the entities that are subject to the procedure of government procurement. And this section is also organized to separately identify entities at the government level, aiming to address each country's particularities and needs. Next slide, please. So, what are the advantages of exploring the potential of EU procurement? First of all, it's the size of the European Union. EU public purchases of goods and services are counted in 2 trillion euros, which is about 3 trillion Canadian dollars. It's a single market that covers all 27 member states, and it's a very open market. There is a central portal, which is called TED, which stands for EU Tenders Electronics Daily System, and it annually awards over 170,000 contracts for goods and services in value over 300 billion euros, which is about 450 billion Canadian dollars. And the EU directives guarantee the transparency of all the procedures. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. So with the procurement, what CETA does, it opens the EU procurement for Canadian companies and Canadian procurement for European companies. But it's mostly focused on high value procurement. There are certain thresholds for different industries. And why is this so? This is so to ensure that the local SMEs are more competitive locally. There's still some preference given to the local small and medium companies when it comes to lower value procurement. But when we're talking about higher value, it's pretty much equal opportunities for both ends, for Canada and European Union. There are some interests. There are some exceptions to the rule. There are some small variations, but exceptions may apply to Aboriginal interests, defense and national security, research and development, financial services, healthcare and social services, recreation, sporting and cultural industries, educational services, regional development, and procurement made on behalf of entities that are not covered by CETA agreement. Now, the way procurement works in the EU, it happens primarily locally in each member state. So you would have the local portals in each member state, and all the member states are working in unifying their procurement portals to one single point. And then you also have the TED portal, which covers the whole EU. A lot of things that you will find on national portals, you will also find on TED, but not all of them. You may find opportunities on local portals that are not included in the general EU TED portal. Now there are direct cross-border procurement opportunities, which is about 3 to 5% of all contracts, and indirect cross-border procurement opportunities, which is about 24% of all contracts. What's the difference between one or the other? Direct is, for example, a company from Canada is bidding directly for EU contract. Indirect would be that they would partner with a local company with EU, or open a local company, local subsidiary in EU, or vice versa, or EU company opening that in Canada and then bidding for a contract in Canada. Now, if you open a local subsidiary of a company, this increases your chances of winning awards by 10. So local subsidiaries are 10 times more successful in winning awards than foreign companies. And establishing local partnerships or opening a local branch are key factors for success, which again is not so hard because both Slovenia and Canada are countries with very simplified, very streamlined procedures for opening a business or opening a subsidiary of business in the other country. Next slide, please. Here is an overview. This graph just shows where most of money in procurement has been allocated in the last few years. And you see the most was being invested in social protection and health, general public services, education, economic affairs, public order and safety, defense, recreation, culture, religion, environmental protection, and housing, communities, and amenities. These were the top areas. These are not the only areas, but these were the top areas where most of contracts were awarded in the last few years. Okay, let's go to the next one. Now, there are certain trends happening in the EU procurement. One of the trends is green procurement. There is a lot of emphasis of promoting green technologies, of promoting the green transition. And a lot of this is explained in the link in the publication, which is basically giving the guidelines on green procurement. After, if anybody would be interested, they can receive the link to that so they can go check it. Another trend of increasing contracts is sustainable healthcare solutions. Another one which is also on the rise is defense, with the current unfortunate security situation in Europe. Another thing that's on the rise is infrastructure, and more emphasis is being put on inclusion of small and medium enterprises. And this will grow in the years to come. Next slide, please. Okay. There are 5 types of procedures when it comes to EU procurement. One type is the open procedures, which is just one stage where all potential suppliers are being researched. Another one is restricted, where minimum of 5 selected suppliers are invited to the second stage. The next one is competitive procedure with negotiation. where at least 3 selected suppliers are invited into the second stage. And there are also some other cases, a bit less common, but I'm not going to go into them. But the criteria used in EU for procurement is, in terms of selection criteria, it's experience, certification, educational, and professional qualifications. Then we have award criteria, which is quality of the bid, price, delivery time, technical merit, and the overall criteria, which is most economically advantageous tender, wins on basis of price to cost or best price quality ratio. Some of the EU member states exclude the use of price as a sole criteria, but not all of them. So under there is certain protection under CETA for EU being involved in the procurement. So under EU directives, contracts above listed thresholds must be advertised on TED portal, and they have to be generally accessible, including EU-based foreign subsidiaries. So as I mentioned before, certain contracts are not advertised on TED portal, and contracts over a certain threshold have to be. So here you have the threshold that have to be advertised there. So 139,000 euros for goods services for central government entities, 214,000 euros for goods services for regional and local entities, 394,000 euros for goods and services for sub-central government entities, and 428,000 euros threshold for goods and services for public utilities. As I mentioned before, is Canada's access to EU procurement opportunities is almost as high as internal EU access due to CETA agreement. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we have some useful links regarding the EU procurement. You can all receive those links at the end if you will request them. The first one is EU tenders portal, where all the public contracts above the previously mentioned thresholds have to be included by law. And then we have a lot of other interesting links here. For example, EU policy on public procurement. It's a very nice read, which explains the background, and some other websites that cover different parts of the procurement system. Okay, next slide, please. Again, we continue on that. I would like to emphasize the link to seminars on European public procurement by the European Institute of Public Administration. We all know that sometimes this is not the easiest or the least complicated thing to deal with, and those seminars are free for everyone, for entities both in Canada and EU, and everyone can go on to get a little bit better grip on applying for public tenders in the future. Okay, a few words about public procurement in Slovenia. I told you about the EU. Well, Slovenian public procurement is harmonized with EU and CETA regulations. It's also defined in detail by the Slovenian law on public procurement. And one of the things that Slovenia is striving towards, it's striving towards socially responsible procurement. And here I've included the link to the guidelines on socially responsible procurement. It's quite a detailed read, but if anybody's interested, you can see where Slovenia is moving towards in that. Next slide, please. Slovenia has a central public procurement portal. It's called EJN, and here is a link to this portal. So pretty much all of the public procurement opportunities have to be published in this. The only thing is that the publication of the contract notices is many times in Slovenian language, while the contracts of higher value, surpassing the threshold that we mentioned before, usually they have a summary on the TED portal, the TED EU portal. And over there, it's in English and also available in all the other EU official languages. Okay. So to wrap it up, summary of reasons to connect with Slovenia. Why should you connect with Slovenia? Slovenia is a high-tech industrial country with an innovative economy. It's placed in an excellent location as a gateway for doing business in Europe. It has well-established trade channels and connections, highly educated and efficient workforce, innovative business environment. It's open for foreign investors, has a very high quality of life, strong governmental support in every phase of the investment, and of course, it has open public procurement opportunities due to CETA agreement. Thank you very much. And I would like to pass the microphone to Sonia and Jamie. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Simon. And thank you very much also for your collaboration. We're very fortunate to have a very good collaborative relationship with the Slovenian embassy in Ottawa, and we continue to do these events together. And in the future as well, I hope, Mr. Pribac, my voice is going. We encourage our audience to connect with the Trade Commissioner through the Embassy of the Republic of Slovenia in Ottawa. And you can also connect with Simon through the Canadian-Slovenian Chamber of Commerce. So now I'm pleased to introduce Mr. James Wallace. Mr. Wallace is the Chief Executive Officer for Supply Ontario. He was the Chief of Staff to the Premier of Ontario, including throughout the global COVID-19 pandemic. James supported the policy work, delivery, and implementation of the government's agenda in partnership with the Ontario Public Service. Prior to joining government, Mr. Wallace spent more than 30 years in the media industry, most recently as Vice President with Post Media. He also had an extensive career as a journalist and is highly regarded as an operational and transformational leader. Thank you so very much, Mr. Wallace, for joining us today. And I offer you the floor.
Thank you, Sonia, for the introduction. Unfortunately, I'm not getting any younger looking. The picture is staying the same, but oh well. And it was good to chat with Simon again before we came on tonight. I'll talk a little bit tonight about Supply Ontario and the mandate that we have from government. But I'm also looking forward to hearing from you and your members on your procurement experiences in Ontario, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's a lot of exciting things happening with our agency and with procurement in general. So hopefully I can share some helpful advice on procuring with the government in this province, with the public sector in this province, and more importantly, sort of our role in trying to modernize procurement in Ontario. I think framing, Simon, I think gave us some very interesting and useful data on Slovenia and some of the trade and products produced there. Ontario and Slovenia, I think, do and can enjoy a growing commercial relationship thanks to CETA. The bilateral merchandise trade between Ontario and Slovenia totaled 163 million in 2023. 11 million of that was Ontario exports to Slovenia, and 152 million was imports. Now, if you look nationally at Canada, it's far more balanced. I think it's pretty equal. But there's a foundation there. There's some business. And I was looking at the types of things, and it's what you might expect. Oral dental preparations are coming in, and medications and blood preparations, stainless steel machine parts. And going out to Slovenia from Canada, there's some food preparation products, tools, ethyl alcohol, machinery. So a lot of, I suppose, meat and potato type of trade between our jurisdiction and Slovenia. But as Simon suggested, CETA provides the opportunity, opens the door, if you will, to more comprehensive and favorable access. Arguably, it gives Canada better access than any other G20 country, and does provide that the groundwork for the healthy trade that I think all of us support. My focus today, however, is going to be on navigating Ontario's complex procurement ecosystem, which can be difficult and frustrating for individual vendors, certainly. It's been 20 years in the making. We've got probably a fair estimate of the annual provincial government spend is about $30 billion. That's hospitals, school boards, universities, colleges, government ministries. It's more than 6,000 entities in total. And then municipalities spend a substantial more on top of that, 30 billion annually. But it's at the same time, it's a highly fragmented ecosystem. So in addition to thousands of individual public sector entities who buy with public dollars, there are thousands of procurement portals, literally, and websites for procurement. So hospital might have its own portal, but it may also, which this further complicates things, it may buy things through a shared service organization. So there's some of the big ones would be, if I'm a hospital and I'm buying medical products, Mohawk MedBuy or Health Pro. So those are the large shared service organizations that purchase on behalf of hospitals and other healthcare entities. Or I might go through a group purchasing organization, which there are smaller ones. Municipalities use them. Many government entities use. There's probably about 25 of those entities around. They might buy together, get together and decide to buy together with their friends. They might buy directly from a vendor, or they might buy through Supply Ontario, through a vendor of record contract arrangement. Now, I'll talk a little bit. Talking a little bit about how we plan to fix that, but for now you can feel sorry for me because my job, and Jackie Gretschy, who's here with me from Supply Ontario, our job is to fix that. So it's complex, it's vastly decentralized, it is fragmented, a lot of individual players, which makes it again, difficult to navigate for individual companies looking for a way to do business with government, and that's part of the reason why Supply Ontario was formed in the first place. And Sonia, are we on the? Maybe we could go to slide number. There we go. I was in the Premier's office during the pandemic, and that's when the Supply Ontario was incubated, I suppose, with a vision to centralize government procurement to achieve savings and efficiencies that could be reinvested back into public services. Also to strengthen the supply chain so that we were safer and we had more access to products we needed when we needed them. And it's interesting in my time here. I've learned that this is something that's happening around the world, and I'll address that presently. Simon talked about the centralized procurement in Slovenia, so we'll touch in a bit about why it's a good idea. At the same time, we are focused on supporting supply chain resiliency, which was a lesson that every jurisdiction around the world learned during COVID. More than 80 countries closed their borders to PPE exports, so masks and gloves and hand sanitizer and those types of products. India banned the export of 7 critical pharmaceutical ingredients, and most nations experienced profound and alarming shortages of those critical supplies. I remember when our colleagues in Quebec were buying ski masks because they couldn't get face shields for hospital workers, and we were working with the auto sector to try to get them to make masks and ventilators and other products that were all of a sudden desperately needed. So building resiliency into Ontario's supply chain is a critical priority for our agency. And there's a number of ways that we're doing that. One method, which again is part of a global trend, is effectively onshoring. So trying to ensure that where it makes sense, and that we're able to, that we procure domestically produced PPE and other goods. Prior to 2020, Ontario bought virtually no PPE from domestic sources, which was why we, like others, ran into trouble when borders closed. Today, we purchase almost 100% domestically. We're also looking at contract diversification, so things like buying from more than one vendor. If you've got all your eggs in one basket, that can be a problem if you fall. And we're looking also more deeply at the supply chain, so where our vendors are getting their products from. Domestic production has had an obvious and added bonus, and that's you're generating economic development, so jobs and growth here in Ontario. There's also tremendous opportunity to drive innovation through procurement. So products that do a better job, that save time, that save money, that are novel and innovative. We're focused on helpfully trying to support and promote the expansion and use of those products across healthcare and education of other places. Obviously, we don't make buying decisions directly necessarily, but we work very closely with all of those sectors: colleges, universities, school boards, hospitals, broader healthcare, and we also are part of the provincial government's innovation framework, the table they announced in the last provincial budget. So, and that's a framework that sets clear expectations and guiding principles around bringing innovation products to market in a sustainable, responsible, and accessible way. And by way of examples, there are different devices we're already looking at in healthcare that reduce the need for 2 procedures into 1, for example. There are other products that produce better patient outcomes. So I think this is another way that we modernize procurement. It's not just about the lowest cost per widget. It's about things like total cost of ownership. It's about what are the benefits beyond costs that we can build into procurement. And then finally, we layer on sustainability into procurement decision making, and that's environmental, social governance, which is another growing procurement consideration worldwide. What are the carbon and environmental considerations around procurement decision-making. Do products originate in a place where forced labor is used or on a coal-fired electricity grid? So there's increasing sensitivity around those issues, and they're beginning to be reflected in procurement decision making. Sonia, maybe next slide, please. So talked a little bit earlier about, and this is really, why does it make sense to centralize procurement? So Slovenia has already gone there. I think it would be very interesting for us to learn more about that experience. So would look forward, Simon, to possibly an opportunity to have that conversation. We've also had chats and looked at some of the programs elsewhere. The federal government in Canada has done a fair amount of work on centralization. Quebec has created an agency, CAG, to centralize their public sector procurement. United Kingdom, they've got a very focused effort with their National Health Service to centralize procurement, and it's always about show me the money. So, and apart from better outcomes and an ability to create jobs and other things, they were able to save 783 million Canadian in their first 3 years, and that was I've seen some of the releases. I think they're well beyond that now. Italy had they're through a similar agency, I suppose, as ours. They aggressively looked at centralization and achieved an estimated cost savings of 6.8 billion Canadian. And then South Korea, which has been doing this since 2002, they've got a fairly sophisticated online e-procurement system, and I think Slovenia is looking and has gone down that path as well. They've digitized their entire procurement process, and they're counting on they're looking at 10.6 billion Canadian annually in transaction cost savings, and it's in the case of South Korea, not a new thing. This is something that's been around for quite a bit of time. Maybe move on to the next slide, because I want to talk a little bit about some of the specific things that Bobby is doing. New legislation that the province passed in 2022. There we go. So Bobby is legislation passed by the government of Ontario in 2022. And it's intended to effectively level the playing field for domestic companies. One of the, in addition to the complexity and the fragmentation in Ontario's procurement ecosystem, one of the repeated complaints that we came across during public consultations last summer was from vendors who are knocking on the door but couldn't get an answer. Vendors who, particularly in the health sciences field, who had innovative products or who had domestic manufacturing capacity, but they were they weren't able to crack the procurement market in Ontario to do business with government. Often because of things like, well, they'd never done business with the government before, so there were terms and conditions around risk provisions within contracts that in some cases made it perhaps more difficult or certainly difficult for domestic companies to get a contract with government. So Bobby was introduced with the intention, again, to level that playing field. It actually requires businesses, requires government and its agencies and entities, ministries, to give preference in public sector procurement for goods and services that fall below specified threshold amounts. It's in CETA, this doesn't guarantee anything, but what it means is if you have a footprint in Ontario, if you're a business with a footprint in Ontario, you've got an office here, you've got staff here, and there's criteria, of course, but basically companies who reside in Ontario, they will. The requirement is that they will be shown preference on, for example, under CETA, goods that fall under 366,000, construction projects under 9 million for ministries. Provincial agencies, it's higher, 651,000 for goods, services, and 9 million for construction. And then municipalities are at the 366 threshold and the 9 million threshold. So what that does is it gets, arguably gets smaller, medium-sized, Ontario business, domestic businesses can be Canadian companies too, where we consider domestic to be Canadian. It gets them, a shot at getting in the door and consideration. And then we layer on, some of the other aspects that we were talking about earlier as well. Should and it is domestic economic our domestic economic benefits, is that something that could be considered? If you're shipping something from Asia, from a potentially a place where they're using forced labor, or potentially from a place where they're using coal-fired electricity, is that a consideration that should form part of the decision-making in procurement decisions? We've worked now with hundreds and hundreds of public sector entities who are procuring, trying to ensure that, one, they understand and they get we provide educational material and advice on how to implement BOBBI. So BOBBI is now in effect. It requires, as I said, compliance in terms of Ontario businesses should be looking to domestic as a first choice under trade thresholds. Be very clear that every procurement still needs to be public, transparent, and trade compliant. It's got to be fair. So we're not talking about changes to the process. We're talking about what considerations matter when we're looking at trade with, procurement with public dollars. There's 5 basic pillars that BOBBI rests on. So if I'm a public sector buyer, I am looking at sustainable procurement as a factor. I'm looking at taking advantage of the vendor of record program, potentially, but any contract that I tender, I'm going to be looking for something other than the lowest cost per dollar. So it's Jackie does a much better job of explaining BOBBI than I do, but I think the bottom line is this is a transformational initiative. It's still in its early stages. It favors Ontario companies, domestic companies, under certain trade thresholds. It is fair, transparent, trade compliant, and we think it has a whole bunch of other benefits associated with it. Sonia, could we move to the slide on there? No, I think was there one other one? Let me see. Hold on. Nope. You're right. You were right. My apologies. So, speaking about Bobby and speaking and thinking about, like, if I'm a domestic company, or if I'm a company from Slovenia and I want to navigate this maze in Ontario, what help can I get? So we've got a couple of links here. We do have webinars. We do have sessions for buyers and sellers. We do have information on our website. We have procurement opportunities with, a lot of it with government ministries is posted on the Ontario Tenders portal. And there's a link here for that as well. I think, Sonia, you'll be sharing this deck, so folks can refer to it later. The portal has very specific documents you can read and download. And then finally, we've got a helpline, effectively, doing business at supplyontario.ca. Now, the last thing I'll chat about is my promise that we are going to fix the landscape, the ecosystem. We'll be going to tender this year to create a one-stop tender portal, which, again, I think, Simon, you mentioned that Slovenia has done something very similar. So for government buyers, for school boards, for hospitals, for municipalities, eventually, if you are procuring with public dollars, there will be one place where you post at least one place where you post your tender, and that'll be with us. You can still tender it on your own website. You can tender it on the shared service organization portal. You can put it wherever you like, but you'll need to post it on our central procurement portal, a digital procurement system. There will be other tools and functions. There will be a vendor registry. There will be sourcing tools for government entities that are looking to buy. So if you register as a vendor, everyone can come to one place. And if you're selling a particular widget that I'm looking for, then there will be a way to look for not only that contract, but potentially other contracts that are similar. The portal will virtually centralize procurement in Ontario. So again, we see that as a transformational step forward. We see it as a way to significantly reduce red tape and provide improved access for companies to procurement opportunities in Ontario. So maybe, Sonia, I can wrap up there, and happy to have questions and
thank you.
Hear about stories.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Wallace, and thank you for offering yourself and Supply Ontario. And we have quite a few people from your office, I see, have also joined us. So we will be sharing your presentation, and we'll certainly be sharing the many websites that were mentioned today, because I'm sure, I don't know if you're screen capturing or trying to furiously write down all these websites. I assure you that all the participants today will be getting all this information after the seminar. And now I'm very pleased to say that Mr. John Doma has been able to join us. and he's the Honorary General Consul for the Republic of Slovenia in Canada. He's the president of the Canadian-Slovenian Chamber of Commerce. He's also the treasurer for European Union Chamber of Commerce, and he's partner of Bateman and McKay LLP. So, Mr. Doma, I think you wanted to say a few words, and thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Sonia, for the introduction. Can you hear me? I just want to confirm because I am off to the side of the road right now. So
we can hear you. I hope you're not driving.
I'm not. Okay. So I stopped. I'm at the side of the road. Anyways, I sorry I wasn't there at the beginning, but I certainly caught quite a bit of the presentation. Mr. Wallace, thank you very much. It was fabulous understanding that the government is making all these very positive changes. And I think Slovenia, I mean, first of all, of course, Canadian, Bobby, as you mentioned, we want Ontario suppliers to be able to provide services. But I think if there's a Slovenian company, they'll fall very well within the realm of the, proper labor practices and then environmental practices that we're looking for here in Canada, that the materials being sourced at a good country. So I'll leave it at that. I want to thank you, all the listeners as well, that you came by. I know Sonia is going to make this presentation available, and certainly, encourage people to listen and look at this. Thank you again, Mr. Wallace. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you, Sonia, and of course you, Sonia.
We'll open up the floor if anybody has any questions. I know there's a couple of people here that there's a multitude of manufacturing and products I can see being represented right now. So I invite you, if you have any questions for Mr. Wallace or Mr. Pribac. Very valuable.
Sonia, can I have a question? I have a question.
Yes.
If Mr. Wallace can expand, I'm not sure if I got this right, but if I'm a vendor and I want to be able to list that I've got these products available, will people in the Ontario government be able to find me on a site that, if, for example, if they're looking for a particular widget, but that my let's see, my profile would come up on a portal of some type?
So if you've got a time machine, you could go right now. But otherwise, it's going to take probably about 18 months to get to a place where we have sourced, procured a central portal, a procurement system that. But the intent is absolutely yes. If you are a vendor and you register on the portal, then everyone who buys will be able to see what you have to offer. And similarly, you will be able to go on there and get notified if there are tenders that match your offerings.
Yeah, I thought you asked her.
Oh. Sorry, John. You have to unmute yourself again.
There I am. Okay, there I am. So does one have to go through a process to ensure that whatever product or service I'm selling, meets the criteria that the province would have, which would be fairly high, I'm sure, in that process?
I think let's say that I sell widgets X, Y, and Z. If I register as a vendor on the portal and I sell widgets X, Y, and Z, then during the procurement process, in terms of the terms and conditions, if I'm then able to bid on a contract, that's when there'll be an examination by the procurement folks to determine whether or not your widgets meet requirements.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Simon, do you have any questions of Mr. Wallace? Yeah, I could do it that way. No?
I would be happy to have more of a debate with Mr. Wallace, but I do not have any specific questions.
I think that, yeah, I think we shared a lot of information.
I think a lot of information was shared. A lot of things were pretty clear. A lot of things work pretty much the same on both sides, on the EU/Slovenian side and on Canadian/Ontario side.
Okay, well, okay. So what I will do is I'll conclude our seminar tonight, and thank you very much, Mr. Pribac. Thank you for being our speaker after, I'm sure you have a little bit of jet lag since you haven't even been here for 24 hours. So I appreciate your presenting. And Mr. Wallace, I'm very honored to be associated with you. I hope we continue this association with the Canadian Slovenian Chamber of Commerce, because I'm sure there will be other companies in that would really appreciate having the resource of Supply Ontario. And the opportunities I can see are just endless for our companies with Canada. So thank you very much.
And thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure, and we're here to help.
Thank you. Okay, I'll be sending the email in the next few days. And for now, na svidenje. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.